Hey, Professor Rapetti here again, and this lecture is about Plato's allegory of the cave and the line, which I will explain shortly. Let me open up my slides so we can be sure to not miss anything important. Okay. Now that's a very nice cave. Beautiful. There's running water. I don't know what Plato's cave looked like, but we'll find out soon. Okay. So in my view, Plato's cave is an analogy, a metaphor, a parable, an allegory, a story. It's fictional, but it's very clever and relevant today. And I think throughout human history, given human nature and the way society works, but more on that shortly. I think that you will be able to see, since we did the pre-Socratics, we did the nature philosophers, of which Parmenides and Heraclitus are both, probably the main nature philosophers, concerned with physis, the physical world, reality. What is the arche? What is the world made out of? The problem of the one and the many. How are the many things that we see unified in one cosmos? What holds it all together? What explains everything? Parmenides, once again, reminding you, was a rationalist. They believe reason is the key to knowledge. Heraclitus, on the other hand, was an empiricist. They believe the senses are the keys to knowledge. Parmenides from Elaea in southern Italy, was Greece then, therefore an Eleatic from Elaea. Heraclitus, a Milesian, modern-day Turkey on the Ionian Sea, called a Milesian from Miletus, or an Ionian. Plato, in his Line and Cave, is trying to unite these two worldviews, these two nature philosophies. Remember, Parmenides thought reality is unchanging because reason said, what is, what is not. Nothing doesn't exist. Change involves something entering to nothing, what was, and something coming out of nothing into what is, out of the future into the present. But something can't arise from nothing, so there can't be any exchange between something and nothing. Change always involves that, and so change is an illusion. The senses depict a world of change, so they're wrong. Reason tells you change is impossible, logically speaking, and therefore, if your senses tell you that something is, but your reason tells you that it is not, you should trust your reason. So if you think you see a round square, reason tells you that you can't, and therefore you don't. And so the impression that you have that you do must be mistaken. All right. Heraclitus, on the other hand, believes in the world of change, so much so that he said you can't step into the same river twice, because the world of our senses is the concrete, realistic world. I believe in what I could see, smell, hear, taste, and touch with my own eyes and hands and so on. That's the world that we live in. If you don't take that seriously, you will die, right? So it's kind of realist's view, whereas reason and logic and abstract thoughts and morals and all those things that aren't physical, things you can't touch, right? Maybe they're made up. Maybe they don't exist at all. They're less real than the concrete, tangible, physical world that we dwell in every day, right? That's the empiricist attitude. Okay, Plato thinks, well, you know what? Both could be true, but at two different levels of reality, one greater than the other. Both real, but in different ways. Clever way. What do we call him? A reconciler or a reconcilianist, right? Uniting, integrating and uniting, synthesizing, as I guess the much later German philosopher Hegel would say. You have a thesis, you have the antithesis, the opposite of it, and then some kind of synthesis that unites them both. All right, so sensory phenomena like the images of the cars going in two directions, red taillights and white headlights, right? Is that what you really see? Or well, look carefully at that. It's kind of shadowy. Can you trust what your senses show you? Or should you trust your mind, reason? Or can you trust both? All right, Plato's going to say both, but some better than the others. Okay, so let's dive right into the hardest thing that you'll ever find in Plato, his theory of the forms, as it's called. Now, when you think of the word form, we think of the shape like a jello form or a cake mold gives you a certain shape, like a triangle has a shape. There's a form, right? The triangular form is different from the square form or the circular form, right? But what is a triangle, right? To get at what Plato's concept of the forms is very abstract. All right, so we're gonna have to work our way into it. It's in a kind of sloppy approach because it's just the language for it almost doesn't exist. Certainly not ordinary language. So what is a triangle? What makes a thing that's a triangle a triangle? What is it about the triangle that makes or guarantees that it is a triangle? So I've got the big pink arrow pointing up at 7 triangles, but in case you didn't notice, the lower right-hand corner of the screen has what looks like a big square composed of a pink and purple triangle. All right. So, but we'll focus on the 7 blue triangles, bluish, turquoise, whatever. Well, it's certainly not the shape because they have different shapes. They're similar shapes, but not the same, right? It's not the size of the sides, right? They don't all have the same size sides. And it's not the angles because they don't all have 90-degree angles or 60-degree angles, right? Some of them do, but not all of them, right? So they're different in size, in shape, in line length, in angle, degree, right? What do they have in common? Okay, so well, let's approach Plato's concept of the form by looking at the conceptual properties. What properties do all these triangles have in common that makes them triangles, right? Well, they're all three-sided, right? And it's not just three-sided because some three-sided figures could have curved lines, right? Not straight lines. So they have to have straight lines. They have to have 3 straight line sides, right? And all 3 sides have to close in a space. This is an open 3-sided figure. This is a closed one, right? Those 3 lines aren't straight. They're almost straight, but they're not, right? So a 3 straight lined sided enclosed plane figure, they're all on an equal plane. They're not 3-dimensional, right? Those are the conceptual properties that triangles all have, right? So we're getting there. We're getting close to the concept of the forms, but those are separate properties, right? They're united, and you might understand what each thing means and understand somehow or another that they unite. And then when they are united, that's what a triangle is, and it differs from a rectangle, which has one more line, but a rectangle is different from a triangle, not only in having one more line, it's also an enclosed plane figure, but a rectangle has 2 pairs of sides that are equal to each other. Sides A and C are equal in length, and sides B and D are equal in length, let's just say, right? So, you know, you add and take away these features, you get other concepts, right? But what Plato is saying is knowing the definition or the concept, that's close to the form. The form is something like the essence of the triangle. Those are characteristics of the triangle, which somehow or another are reflections of its essence, right? Its essence is exhibited or manifest in the constellation of those properties related to each other in the way that they're configured, right? But the whole, the essence of a triangle is greater than those properties, even though it's constituted by them, right? But the mind, when it gets the whole that's greater than the sum of its parts in a direct kind of mental intuition or apprehension or acquaintance with the pure essence of the concept of the triangle, what in German might be called the Gestalt, the holistic sense of the thing, right? That's the form, right? Well, that might not even be the best way to say it, but that's the way that I think I can try to make Plato's theory about forms somewhat graspable by ordinary people who aren't necessarily philosophers. It's difficult even for philosophers. Okay, so that's a start. Triangleness or triangularity or trianglehood, right? The words don't even sound right. The form or essence of a triangle. Let's think of some other things. So look at all those people. What is a person? All right, and just like with the triangle, we say, well, what makes all of those people people? What is it that all people share in common, which makes them people, right? That's the set of people, right? Well, it's not the shape because they have different shapes, just like the triangles. They have different sizes, so it's not the size. They have different colors, so it's not the colors. They even have different sexes, so it's not the sex. They have different genes, so it's not the genes, although they have some genetics in common, right? But what are the conceptual properties of personhood, right? Well, you might want to just say Homo sapiens. If you think by that, what it means is a highly intelligent, therefore rational member of a social species of primates, of higher primates, or the great apes. We're actually a member of the great apes, which are mammals, which are vertebrae, which are animals, which are living things, right? You kind of map out all the features that make something a human in biological language, right? But we also, more than that, are individuals, right? All the individuals up there in the picture, they have different personalities, different postures, they have different preferences and habits and character traits and identities, personalities and histories, and right. So it gets pretty complicated, but what do they all share? Something that Plato would call, if you get what it is to be a person, the gestalt of it, right? The essence of personhood, right? And there might be different kinds of people that you can get the essences of those too, but the most abstract is personhood, right? Then you've got the form of the person. Now, some people like to use Plato's concept of the forms to say that a really good artist or sculptor, right, who makes a statue of like David and Goliath, like Michelangelo's David, right, captures the essence of a man, right? Or the Mona Lisa, or a work of Shakespeare captures the essence of a certain kind of vindictive character or something like that, right? Certain kinds of music just seems to touch the form of beauty in some way, right? So these are more complex applications of the concept of the forms, all right? But concepts, looking at objects, looking at their characteristics, extracting out the ones that are accidental, like the colors and shapes, that those are irrelevant, but looking at the ones that are essential, you get all the properties that are essential, and then you unite them in the whole and get the gestalt of it, then you've got the form. Doesn't matter whether it's a triangle, the perfect coffee cup, whatever. Okay. So, yes. So, yeah, we can look at this and ask this question: what is anything, right? What is anything? You got living things, non-living things. What makes a thing what it is? And this is something that Aristotle will also take up. Is it its matter, right? All those things in the chart there, living and non-living, are made up of material matter. They're physical, right? Is it the parts? The tree has branches, it has a trunk, it has roots, it has leaves, right? But the leaves fall off and the apples fall off, but it's still a tree. right? And so on. And you yourself, as like a picture of people in the living category, you were an embryo, then a fetus, then an infant, then a toddler, and then pre-K, and then kindergarten. I don't know if you went to pre-K, first grade, eighth grade, junior high school, and now you're in college, or high school and college, depending on who's looking at this video, right? Or whatever. The point is, that you change, right? So the configuration of your parts changes, right? Just like that little Volkswagen, if it gets a really bad flat tire, you can't even repair it. You have to replace it, right? But it's still that car, right? So it's the parts, it's the configuration of the parts, right? And it's the properties that those parts in that configuration enable things to become actual properties of the thing, like the wheels attached to the axle, attached to the engine, and so on, enable that car to be locomotive, to move, right? Just like the mouse over there, having the paws that it has and eyes and ears and whatnot, can navigate and move around its environment, but the tree can't. It can only grow, right? So the shape is irrelevant. These things are always changing, but there's something about these things that is the essence of them, which is the pure idea, the gestalt, the what it is to be that thing. And Plato believes that that's its essence and it's unchanging, even though it's almost like soul, right? So my body always changes, my states of mind change, my memory changes over the years, right? But I don't change. That essence that is me, it's like my soul, right? So you might want to think of the form as a kind of soul of a thing in some sense, right? But maybe not in the Catholic or Christian sense, right? Of some kind of supernatural thing that, even though they're immaterial for Plato, right? We'll say we'll talk more about why he thinks the forms are immaterial shortly. Okay. Oh, in fact, now we will. Right? Did we cover everything on the previous slide? Yes. So here's a simpler way of talking about it. This is a way that philosophers since Plato have, even in Indian philosophy, have talked about these ideas by making a distinction between what we call universals and particulars, right? So you might come across a lot of red apples, right? They're all apples. They share somehow or another in the property of being an apple, right? But that thing, the form of apple or the concept of apple, is kind of reflected in all of them, but it's independent of them. It's universal. It's true across all instances of apples, right? But it's not actually in the apple. It's the abstract concept, right? It's the universal. That's what we call it, as opposed to a particular. This particular patch of red or this particular apple, right? Over here, I've got my pink arrow pointing to a bunch of different patches of red in a big red square made out of smaller red patches, right? And they're all kind of shades of red, so to speak, right? They're shades of red, and some of them are blended with, I guess, with brown or black or whatever, or white that make them darker or lighter. But, so maybe the one in the upper right-hand corner or the one right below that might be what you think is, the closest one to redness itself. But what they all have in common with them is more or less redness, right? Redness is a property that exists independent of all the instances of red. Here's a way of thinking about it. Triangularity, the concept of it, exists even if there were never any triangles in the world, right? You can, in fact, conceptually construct a 1,000-sided figure, let's just say, right? Although you never come across one, and suppose that one never existed, but if one did exist, it would reflect that concept. The concept is a universal. The concepts never change, right? The particulars do. Apples come in and out of existence. Patches of red come in and out of existence on apples and other things, right? So there's this patch of red or that apple and this apple or this, whatever. These things come and go and they change. And it's not like they're all attached to redness, right? Or applehood, right? You can imagine like some little core in the middle, which is applehood or redness, with little lines connecting it to every little red thing or every little apple in the universe as if they're attached. No, The abstract thing, the form of it is invisible. It is intangible. It's not physical. It's abstract, just like the abstract concept of numbers, right? If you have two apples, you don't also have the number two, right? You've got one apple, which is a whole. So it's a unit, a one-it, a unit is a uno-it, right? And one and another one is two ones, right? It's just a way of the one and the two concept are conceptual. They're not in the apples, right? This apple and this apple aren't two apples. There's one apple and one apple, right? And the one and the two are not in either or both of them. It's just a concept that is reflected in them in some way. All the abstract concepts are universals, even concepts that apply to concrete things like apples or redness, okay? That's what they have in common. So the essence of red, let's just say. All right, so universals are kind of like forms. All right, but some philosophers just, try to make the lightest of it. We call them minimalists or nominalists because they say, well, these are just names. They just name these things, right? And we use the same name for red whenever anything that's red appears. We use the same name for apple when anything that apple appears, and there's nothing hooky or abstract or forms going on about that, right? So philosophers to this day are debating the difference between particulars and universals, okay? But that might help you understand where Plato is going somewhat. All right, some other aspects of Plato's thought that you need to get in order to understand the line in the cave more fully is this thing about between Parmenides, the changeless, and Heraclitus, the changing, right? So you've got changeless reality, according to Parmenides, and changing world of appearances, according to Heraclitus. So Plato starts to construct his division and his way of uniting but separating both in a way, in a complicated way, by describing the world of reason, the world of abstract concepts and abstract objects like triangularity, redness, two-ness, five-ness, squareness, personhood, right? All of these abstract concepts, these universals, right? He calls those the intelligible world, right? Which by which he means the world about which we can make more meaning and sensibility and more knowledge. We can know 2 + 2 is 4, even if we never encounter 2 and 2 of anything, and then count them and find 4, right? The abstract truth never changes. 2 + 2 is 4, regardless of how many apples we ever have or don't have or lose, or if they vanish before us, before we even eat them, right? So what's knowable is truth, and truth or reality doesn't change. 2 + 2 will equal 4 for all eternity, even if the big heat death of the universe happens, and then there's another big bang after that, and there's another universe with radically different laws, right? 2 + 2 will still be 4, even if in that universe there are never 2 objects plus another 2 objects, right? That's the idea. Like, these truths don't change. Truth doesn't change, reality doesn't change, knowledge doesn't change. Knowledge is awareness of, or recognition and appreciation of, direct access to, in some way, shape, or form, truth and reality, right? That never changes. Universals don't change. Concepts don't change. Triangle will be a triangle for all eternity, even if you never see a triangle after this moment. You will, though. I've got some in future slides. So logic, math, reason, knowledge, none of those things ever change. Parmenides was right about that, right? That reality and truth never change in some sense, in an important sense, Plato says. Okay, but when it comes to the other guy, Heraclitus, right? What changes is the world of appearances. The world of our senses depicts change constantly. The way things seem to appear to us, the way they seem, the way they appear. When we look, hear, smell, taste, or touch, through our 5 modes of contacting the world of physical objects, they're always changing. right? Our sense perceptions are constantly changing. That's why Heraclitus said you can't step into the same river twice, not only because the river is constantly changing, but so are you. You are changing just like the river. You might not seem to be changing because maybe you're changing slower than the river, right? But you are. Even a big mountain that's there for millions of years is changing slowly, even though you don't know it, right? Heraclitus said it's like it's on fire, but it's a really slow burn, right? Down on the atomic level or something like that. So the particulars always change, but the universals never change. Our bodies change, physical objects change, things change, all kinds of events change. It was raining, it's not raining. That was a caterpillar, then it was in the cocoon, now it's a butterfly, right? That's the world of the senses, the world of appearances, the physical world, the visible world, the audible world. That's a world of change. They're both real in some way, but not the same way, Plato says, okay? Okay, now before we look at the line itself or the cave, here's a little test to try to drive home another one of Plato's ideas about how knowledge is, in his view, more reliably based on reason than it is on sensory perception or appearances, the way things look, right? So here's an example of that. Now, try not to figure out what the trick is or whatever. Just use your common sense here and look at that square, right? We've got a square within a square. Not perfect because the one inside is poking through the top just a little, but assume that these were both perfectly square and one was perfectly inside the other and four corners were just touching the four sides in the middle of each side. All right, so square B is the little one in the middle, square A is the larger one outside. So the question is, obviously square A is visually larger than square B, right? How much larger is A compared to B? Is it twice as large, like double the size? That would be 100%. Like if you had $50 and then you had $100, $100 would be 100% more than $50. It would double the $50, right? So answer one, this is multiple choice, is that the larger square is twice as large, 100% larger. Second choice is, well, it's almost that big, but not that much bigger. It's like almost double, it's 3/4 larger, right? And the third one says that, no, even that's a little too much. It's at most 50% larger because look, like if you turn the one inside so that it's in the same direction as the one outside, there probably is not going to be that much room left. Like it might even only be answer 4, 25% larger, either 50 or 25. It depends on how you look at it and how you reason when you try to figure it out. Now, don't look this one up online to find the answer. I want you to experience this using your sense perceptions. How do things appear, the appearance of it, right? What your senses tell you, right? If you recall, Zeno said you can't trust your senses. Try to trust your senses right now, right? And commit yourself to an answer based on what you see with your own eyes, okay? So is it 1? Is it 2? Is it 3? Is it 4? Put up your answer, whatever it is, right? 3, 4, 2, 1, whatever. Hold up that finger, right? Just for a moment, or write it down so that you know you committed yourself. Okay. Answer: knowledge is not reliably based on appearances. Now, I took the liberty of forming a proof here by using a pink purplish line to cut every square into 4 smaller squares. So if you look at the big square, I've got a line going from top to bottom that cuts it in 2, and then a line going across that cuts it in 2 the other way. Oh, that one's black, not purple. Doesn't matter. Right? So you see, and then I have also got lines going from corner to corner, cutting the larger square again into smaller chunks, right? But now here's the thing. Every little triangle that you see in here is the same size and shape as every other one, just pointing in a different direction, right? So if you take like the 4 triangles in the upper left-hand corner, 1, 2, and then blank and blank, you can see 1 is the same as 2, and 1 and 2 are the same as the 2 above it that don't have numbers in it, right? But I numbered the ones inside because they're in the smaller square, right? There's 8 of those, right? And then if you count the ones that don't have numbers, that's another 8. All right, go ahead, take your time and go count them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Right? And 8 and 8 is 16. So, and they're all in the bigger one. So there's 16 of those equally sized triangles in the bigger one, but the smaller box only has 8. And 8 is half of 16. 16 is twice as much as 8. So therefore, the big box is twice the size as the small one. Doesn't look that way, but I've just given you a mathematical logical proof that demonstrates the truth of the fact that answer 1, 100% is the correct answer. All right, let me show you again. If you had one finger up, good for you, especially if you figured that out on your own somehow. All right, but don't feel bad. Most of my students pick 2, 3, or 4, right? A couple of them pick 4, a couple of them pick 1. Most people pick 2 or 3. This is the order of answers, I think. Well, it doesn't matter. You got it right or you got it wrong. Most students get it wrong. That's the interesting thing, okay? And that's the point that's being made. Knowledge based on, this is the second from the bottom bullet, knowledge based on mere sense perception, appearances, is unreliable. Knowledge based on reason is reliable. Now that you saw the truth of that, you saw it not with your eyes so much as with your mind, although your eyes assisted you, right? And the proof could be given in mathematical terms, just the equations, without even looking at a diagram. And if you know enough about math, you know that that's possible. And I'm not going to go through with it because most students would have some difficulty following the math. And it would take me a while to actually figure out what the equations are that would show that. But the fact is, once you get a mathematical truth, you've got it, right? It's like a gestalt for you, right? So next time you see a diagram like this, you just should remember to carve it up into triangles and then count up the triangles. You've got a procedure, right? Which is a proof. Okay. So now I think we have enough of the rudimentary elements of Plato's thinking, which go into his construction of what he called the divided line, which he doesn't give diagrams for. His verbal descriptions of it are pretty complicated, and different writers, different philosophers, different teachers and historians will give diagrams for it in different ways, either having the line going up or the line going across. It doesn't matter as long as, they're equivalent in some way. Okay, so I like this one first to look at it because it's an easy intro or easy segue into this concept of the line. So the line going up and down the middle separates the physical world on the left, the world of the senses, Heraclitus's world, the world where rivers and people change, from the line on the right side, which is the line that has mathematical truths in it and concepts and forms and reason and knowledge and logic, right? And the line going this way across, right, separates the metaphysics on top and the epistemology on the bottom. So the metaphysics on top, metaphysics is the study of being, existence, or reality. So the top half above the horizontal line represents the 2 dimensions of the world, or the 2 worlds, or 2 realms, or 2 domains of existence, of being. The physical world, which is visible, and the invisible world, which is intelligible, right? The visible world is always changing and becoming. So that says becoming, and that's all you can get on that side of it is opinions, right? But on the other side, in the invisible world, the intelligible world, it's intelligible, it's the mode of being because it doesn't change. Being is, it's not in a state of becoming, it never changes, right? But it's accessible through the intellect, okay? And then at the bottom, underneath, above the line is all the metaphysics, what exists in reality, two different worlds. And the bottom line is about knowledge. How do we know? What kind of mental states, what kinds of approximations to knowledge or degrees or types of knowledge can we have about the two worlds above? On the bottom, well, when it comes to the physical world, right, we've got physical objects and we can form beliefs about them. And then like they have shadows, reflections, photographs of them, paintings, drawings, all those mirror images. Those are things that are all like shadows. Those are very speculative. We can speculate, form conjectures or whatever. Our opinions are very flaky. Whereas at least if we see a physical object, we can form a better view of it. We can have a belief, which is somewhat stable, but even those are subject to change. They're not the same as knowledge on the right side, which is based on reason, like what you just saw over here, right? You used your reason, your mathematical calculations and logic to figure that out. And you know that, and you will not be, you cannot have your opinion or your belief changed about it once you've secured the knowledge of it, right? So understanding is through mathematics, and knowledge, which is higher. Science helps us, abstract philosophical reasoning helps us to be able to intuit the essences or the forms, the gestalt, what makes a thing what it is. Those things don't change, even though those are the universals. The particular versions of them over there in the physical world, they change all the time, right? So this is a good way, a good segue into it. Now I have another way of depicting this, where the lines go the other way. Like I said, it doesn't really matter what's horizontal and what's vertical as long as you represent what Plato's ideas are about both. So I apologize about the diagram in the middle because I copied that off of the internet, and it's a little blurry when I enlarged it. You can pretty much read it if you're careful, right? The divided line, a picture of Plato's ontology, ontology. Ontological or ontology is pretty much a synonym for metaphysical or metaphysics, the study of being. Ontic or ontos has to do with being. The structure of the world, what the nature philosophers were trying to figure out. What is reality? What's it made out of, right? Those are ontological questions or metaphysical questions. Some philosophers find a subtle difference between the two terms. I don't consider that relevant. It doesn't matter. If you want to use them differently, that's up to you. Like ethics and morals, almost the same. You could use them to mean different things. As long as you're clear about which meaning you mean, or that you don't think that there is an important meaning between them, just be clear about what you mean, right? Okay, so now the line goes different, up and down, right? The line that went across goes up and down. So, and the metaphysics is on the left side and the epistemology is on the right side. And I have those words beneath the chart, right? Metaphysics is on the left side of the chart at the bottom, epistemology is on the right side. Epistemology is all about not knowing, believing, information, right? How do we know what we know? So you can see we're going to start at the bottom, and you got unicorns, fiction, theater, reflection, shadow, sculpture, painting. Those all involve some kind of imagination where you are imagining that this replica is the real thing, right? On the left, you're in the world of images and reflections, okay? Those are not the same things as going up a notch above the first bar, the first horizontal bar. You've got the world of objects, and you got a list of them on the side, on the right side: tables, dogs, trees, cars, birds, etc., right? And the epistemology of that is belief, which is all the way on the right, right? So now all of that, everything beneath the middle horizontal line is in the world of objects and images. That's the world of appearances, right? That's Heraclitus's world. And everything on the left in blue, it says to the far left, temporal, meaning it's in time, so it's always changing. Sensory, it's what you perceive with your senses. And material, it's all made out of matter or repercussions of matter, like reflections on matter or whatever, right? On the right side, the bottom, below the bottom horizontal line is imagination, but above that is belief, right? So you're kind of speculating and imagining, and you're not sure of yourself when you're just seeing reflections or TV images, if it's real or if it's kind of fake news or whatever it is, right? Because it's on the media, it's on the internet, it's on social media, right? Or just literally shadows or apparitions or dreams, right? Or paintings or photographs. You don't know if Photoshop was used, if that's really a picture of that guy doing that, or if it was Photoshopped, right? So these things have some information in them, but they're a step away from the actual things like tables and dogs and trees, right? You can form more reliable beliefs about the world of physical objects than you can about the world of images, okay? So if you look on the right and left, far right and far left, you've got those arrows going from ignorance to enlightenment, or from most real down to the least real, right? If you're moving in those directions, that's what's happening. So let's look again at the top half above the middle horizontal line. On the right side, you've got the intellect, which perceives, geometric figures, shapes, numbers, equations, universals, concepts, and Plato puts in souls there because the essence of a person, right, or a living thing is a soul, right? The gestalt of it. It's not physical, right? I stay the same even though my body changes, my physical body changes, but I don't change. That's the idea, right? And above that is goodness and being itself, right? I think there's a slash next to the word being, right? The highest level of being, right, is goodness, which is like the form of goodness. Oh, and Plato makes this other thing that's not on this diagram, that in the horizontal line in the middle, which separates the visible world from the invisible world, the sun is the source of all goodness and whatever approximates knowledge and life in the physical world. The good in the invisible, intangible, but intelligible world, the good is the form of forms, right? It's the top, it's being itself, and it functions like the sun in the intelligible world because it makes everything else knowable, right? And that's the highest wisdom. And in the same way that you perceive the form of this or that individual thing, like a triangle or a person, right? Those are, let's say, like features of intelligibility itself. Pure intelligibility, pure being, pure form, pure essence of pure essence is goodness itself. And that functions like a sun, that in the same way that the sun feeds everything in the physical world, the good, the form of the good feeds everything in the intelligible world because knowledge and wisdom is inherently good, right? That's what Plato thinks. It's sort of a mystical view. And you could see why the later Platonists, called Neoplatonists, fused together with the Christians, right? Because then God, ideas in God's mind are Plato's forms, and God is the form of all forms. He's the sun in the intelligible world. He's the good. God is the good itself, right? So there's the reason why you'll find we're going to do Neoplatonism and Christianity a little bit later in the semester. On the left side, right, of course, the intellect accesses the intelligible world. And that's like the world of numbers and math and logic and all that kind of stuff. That's eternal, it's not temporal, it's timeless. Temporal means in time. Eternal means out of time. It's not in a particular time, it's in all times and beyond all times. Like 2 + 2 is 4 is not something that's true in one moment but false in the next. It has nothing to do with time, right? It's eternal, it's timeless, right? They're invisible. You can't see these things. You can't see that 2 + 2 is 4. You could see someone write something that means that, but you don't see that with your eyes, right? And it's not physical, so it's immaterial, right? This is the immaterial world. So now reality gets greater as you go up the line in the middle here, right? So that The physical world is real, but less real than the non-physical or immaterial world, the world of the forms, right? The world of the mind, the world of reason. Reason is at the top. And philosophical reasoning is how you go from, look at the arrow on the right side, the pink arrow. You ascend up from ignorance and delusion, living in a world of imagination. For those of you, by the way, who are hooked to your devices and to all your, Netflix series and all your apps and all that other stuff, you're living in a world of reflections and mirrors and shadows and representations and imagination and images and everything, right? That's the least real. More real than that is put your cell phone down and go out for a walk and see a real tree, talk to real people, right? More real than all of that is the world that reason reveals for you. Knowledge is about concepts and forms and mathematics and things like that and logic, right? And getting the gestalt, the essence of a thing. Once you have that, you can't lose your knowledge of those sorts of things, right? No one can steal your knowledge from you once you have that. But if you merely have beliefs or you're in the world of imagination, you're almost entirely engrossed in the visible world as if that's the greater reality, then you could easily have your beliefs persuaded out of you, right? But once you learn, for example, whoops, one moment. Like I said, once you learn this math issue, you'll never forget it, unless you really smoke a lot of pot and it messes up your memory, or you have amnesia or something like that. As long as your brain is working, right? But this movement upwards is the movement from delusion and ignorance, which means not knowing, up into the world of wisdom and enlightenment. Enlightenment, the light goes off, the light of the good, the sun in the intelligible world, right? And this process of philosophical transcendence or ascent, going up almost into heaven, the world of wisdom, philosophical truth and insight, Plato calls that anagoge, all right? It's a funny sounding word, it's another language, but it's an important one. And Plato was a spiritual man. He was somewhat mystical. He believed in a way that this other world was more real than this one, and that reincarnation is true, and that souls are the part of us that's not just the body, right? But that is kind of accessed through reason, and reason, philosophical analysis, trying to understand is how you do understand. And that enables you, when you look at, okay, you extract out what are the features of a triangle from the shape and the color and all those different things that are not the accidental properties of this particular triangle or that particular triangle, that they don't all have the same shape, right? So it's not the shape, right? And you get the conceptual properties, right? That's through reasoning, taking out what's essential, leaving behind what's not, and then seeing how they're integrated and how they form a whole. And then you get the gestalt. This is a mental thing. This is a process of philosophical seeing. When I say I see your point, I have an insight, right? Like this was an insight that you had when you figured out this math issue here, right? That's mental seeing. That's seeing with your mind, right? You get it. That's a eureka moment. You grok it, to use a term from science fiction, G-R-O-K. You completely get the gestalt of something, you grok it. Okay. Now, I think we know enough about the line to really appreciate the cave, the allegory of the cave. So now I need to stop my share for a moment. Hello. And share something else. That same thing. By the way, if you want to come back to this and watch the video that I'm about to show you again, you'll be able to just click on it on the PowerPoint, and that'll work. Give me a moment. Screen share. Okay, here it comes. Allegory of the cave. And let me play that for you. And this is only a 4.5-minute video.
What is reality? Knowledge, the meaning of life. Big topics you might tackle figuratively, explaining existence as a journey down a road or across an ocean, a climb, a war, a book, a thread, a game, a window of opportunity, or an all too short-lived flicker of flame. 2,400 years ago, one of history's most famous thinkers said life is like being chained up in a cave, forced to watch shadows flitting across a stone wall. Pretty cheery, right? That's actually what Plato suggested in his Allegory of the Cave, found in Book 7 of the Republic, in which the Greek philosopher envisioned the ideal society by examining concepts like justice, truth, and beauty. In the allegory, a group of prisoners have been confined in a cavern since birth with no knowledge of the outside world. They are chained facing a wall, unable to turn their heads, while a fire behind them gives off a faint light. Occasionally, people pass by the fire carrying figures of animals and other objects that cast shadows on the wall. The prisoners name and classify these illusions, believing they're perceiving actual entities. Suddenly, one prisoner is freed and brought outside for the first time. The sunlight hurts his eyes, and he finds the new environment disorienting. When told that the things around him are real, while the shadows were mere reflections, he cannot believe it. The shadows appeared much clearer to him, but gradually his eyes adjust until he can look at reflections in the water, at objects directly, and finally at the sun, whose light is the ultimate source of everything he has seen. The prisoner returns to the cave to share his discovery, but he is no longer used to the darkness and has a hard time seeing the shadows on the wall. The other prisoners think the journey has made him stupid and blind and violently resist any attempts to free them. Plato introduces this passage as an analogy of what it's like to be a philosopher trying to educate the public. Most people are not just comfortable in their ignorance, but hostile to anyone who points it out. In fact, the real-life Socrates was sentenced to death by the Athenian government for disrupting the social order, and his student Plato spends much of the Republic disparaging Athenian democracy, while promoting rule by philosopher kings. With the cave parable, Plato may be arguing that the masses are too stubborn and ignorant to govern themselves. But the allegory has captured imaginations for 2,400 years because it can be read in far more ways. Importantly, the allegory is connected to the theory of forms developed in Plato's other dialogues, which holds that, like the shadows on the wall, things in the physical world are flawed reflections of ideal forms, such as roundness or beauty. In this way, the cave leads to many fundamental questions, including the origin of knowledge, the problem of representation, and the nature of reality itself. For theologians, the ideal forms exist in the mind of a creator. For philosophers of language viewing the forms as linguistic concepts, the theory illustrates the problem of grouping concrete things under abstract terms. And others still wonder whether we can really know that the things outside the cave are any more real than the shadows. As we go about our lives, can we be confident in what we think we know? Perhaps one day a glimmer of light may punch a hole in your most basic assumptions. Will you break free to struggle towards the light, even if it costs you your friends and family? Or stick with comfortable and familiar illusions? Truth or habit? Light or shadow? Hard choices, but if it's any consolation, you're not alone. There are lots of us down here.
Okay. So let me get my PowerPoint back up. We'll talk about this a little bit, and then we'll move along. Okay, so you just saw the animated film on Plato's cave. Here's a more recent version. This is a picture of the Matrix. If you haven't seen it, you are not very culturally informed or philosophically informed, because this is probably the most philosophical film that has been in your lifetime. Some of you might be young enough so that it came out before you were born, but nonetheless, made so far is the way I should have put it. Quick story for those of you who haven't seen it. This is a science fiction thing about the future, where artificial intelligence, machines took over and destroyed most of mankind and the earth, and imprisoned whatever humans were left and kind of breeds them and keeps them alive in these states of suspended animation in these pods and gelatinous fluid. And they have cables connected to the back of their brains that connect them to a supercomputer that's feeding them experiences like dreams, but so well because of neuroscientific knowledge that the artificial intelligence has, that they think they're in reality. And then, of course, some of them who haven't been captured yet try to, rescue the rest. And they start out by approaching this one character, Neo, played by Keanu Reeves. And they go into his dream. They hack the Matrix and go into his head. And he represents a kind of Messiah figure. Neo means new, the new man. And try to see if they could reach him, even though he's in this world of delusion his whole life, and that's all he knows, right? And get him to realize that he's in a kind of cave. He's in a fake world. And if he's willing to come out of it, they will literally go in and take his body and help him to rescue his body physically from the Matrix pod that it's in, and then, start the revolution and all this other kind of stuff. It's an excellent movie. So I'm going to stop to share, but if you want to watch it again, there's the link in the PowerPoint so that I could bring up in a new share and play that for you. Otherwise, it won't work right in the video here. So here we go.
It is this feeling that has brought you to me.
Well, let me start that again.
Do you know what I'm talking about? It is this feeling that has brought you to me.
Wait a minute. There we go.
It is this feeling that has brought you to me.
Okay, that's the beginning.
Do you know what I'm talking about?
Matrix.
Do you want to know what it is? The Matrix is everywhere. It is all around us. Even now, in this very room. You can see it when you look out your window or when you turn on your television. You can feel it when you go to work, when you go to church, when you pay your taxes. It is the world that has been pulled over your eyes to blind you from the truth.
What truth?
That you are a slave, Neo. Like everyone else, you were born into bondage, born into a prison that you cannot smell or taste or touch. A prison for your mind. Unfortunately, no one can be told what the Matrix is. You have to see it for yourself. This is your last chance. After this, there is no turning back.
Right now, we're inside a computer program.
Is it really so hard to believe? Your clothes are different, the plugs in your arms and head are gone. Your hair has changed. Your appearance now is what we call residual self-image. It is the mental projection of your digital self.
This isn't real.
What is real? How do you define real? If you're talking about what you can feel, what you can smell, what you can taste and see, then real is simply electrical signals interpreted by your brain. This is the world that you know. The world as it was at the end of the 20th century. It exists now only as part of a neural interactive simulation that we call the Matrix. You've been living in a dream world, Neo. This is the world as it exists today. Welcome to the desert of the real.
We are Middlesex County.
Okay, so let me stop the share and continue with the PowerPoint slides. We're getting there, okay? So in this slide, which has another video that you can watch again later on if you like, we'll start in the upper right-hand corner where you've got a picture of a brain with a video controller joystick, right? Almost embedded in your brain. For anybody who's ever been hooked on video games, then look at the question on the top of the page. Where is your mind on the appearance reality line, on Plato's line, right? If you've been in kind of like virtual reality, video games, you're looking at reflections and shadows and imagination, all right, you're low on the line. You need some anagage to elevate your consciousness. And next one to the left is a person who's almost like as if they've gone through halfway through the wall of their cell phone and, in search of likes and hearts, right? Social media approval, right? That's the approval of the other prisoners in the cave, right? Oh, look at the shadows on the wall. Yeah, yeah, we agree. I knew that. Yeah, we agree. Yeah, we're so smart. We know all about the shadows, right? I want to get approval from the other shadow lovers, right? Go a step further over to the left and you'll see the idea is that you're being manipulated through your cell phone, right? Because you're like a puppet on a string, right? Big data analyzes everything that you do and then tailors the matrix algorithms just for you in ways that tremendous amounts of research go into them, figuring out how to control you to get you to buy their products, right? Or vote for their candidate, right? And it's not just you. Look to the next one, the upper left-hand corner. Mostly your entire generation looks like that when they're hanging out in Starbucks, right? Sitting around the table, looking into their matrices, right? Drop down to the next one. Then there's the selfies, which is images of yourself that are reflections, that are representations like mirror images, but the person in the picture is all done up with fancy and make themselves look better and everything, which only gets worse. But that's the selfie thing, which is part of this whole thing. The image, right? Like there was a saying about my generation. If you remember what happened in the 60s, you weren't really there. Because if you were really there, you were living in the moment. You were probably in an altered state of consciousness and you didn't have time to take notes. You certainly didn't have time to take pictures. Right? And like whoever had the pictures from my generation was probably the person who was on the sidelines and wasn't really part of the experience, right? Okay, so much for my critique of the selfie, but I've got more coming on that. Now, the person down below, like they might as well just, the thing about the ostrich puts his head in the ground so he doesn't have to see reality. So this person is pulling an ostrich move, burying their head in the sand of their cell phone, not seeing real reality because, it may be less pleasant than fake reality. All right, and now we've got in the bottom center 2 women who are doing, what is that called? Catfishing, right? Now, whether or not maybe they've got those apps where you take a picture of yourself and you just keep enhancing it, and it's kind of looks like a version of you, like the girls taking the selfie who've got their makeup on and their hats and their clothes and their posture, and they're making themselves look ways in which they not normally, right? They're posing. You say, man, he's a poser because he's fake, right? They're posing, but over here we got catfish going on, whether that's just someone else's picture, which some catfishers do. They just take someone else's complete picture, right? Like I could put that picture up of me, the girl with the big, both of those girls with the big lips, right? And it could be me, just playing around on the internet. I saw a movie about this recently, which was not a movie, it was a series that was pretty freaky called Clickbait. Highly recommended for those of you who do most of your social life online with people that you don't really know. Okay. Of course, Black Mirror has some episodes that touch on some of these things. And then the last picture in the lower right-hand corner is somebody who's literally in virtual reality. VR is pretty cool. I mean, it's worth trying, but don't blur the lines between reality and virtual reality. All right, now I want to show you something. This is going to be almost like a kind of break, like recess in class, but it should be meaningful. I hope you enjoy it. Let's try this screen share.
When Jason was at the table, I kept on seeing him look at me while he's with that other girl. Do you think he was just doing that to make me jealous? Because he was totally texting me all night last night, and I don't know if it's a booty call or not. So, what do you think? Did you think that girl was pretty? How did that girl even get in here? Do you see her? She's so short, and that dress is so tacky. Who wears cheetah? It's not even summer. Why is the DJ keep on playing Summertime Sadness? After down the bathroom, can we go smoke a cigarette? I really need one. But first, let me take a selfie. Can you guys help me pick a filter? I don't know if I should go with XX Pro or Valencia. I want to look tan. What should my caption be? I want it to be clever. How about living with my bitches, #live. I only got 10 likes in the last 5 minutes. Do you think I should take it down? Let me take another selfie. Let me take a selfie.
Who wants to be in the Chainsmokers music video?
Wait, pause. Jason just liked my selfie. What a creep. Is that guy sleeping over there? Yeah, the one next to the girl with no shoes on. That's so ratchet. That girl is such a fake model. She definitely bought all her Instagram followers. Who goes out on Mondays? Okay, let's go take some shots. Oh no. Oh, I feel like I'm gonna throw up. Oh wait, never mind. I'm fine. Let's go dance. There's no vodka at this table. Do you know anyone else here? Oh my god, Jason just texted me. Should I go home with him? I guess I took a good selfie. Let me take a selfie.
right. Let me stop my screen share and start it up again. We have another slide or two, I think. I hope that was entertaining. Okay, so some takeaways from the allegory of the cave and the line. Well, just think about, how do you relate that to what we were talking about? Let's see, let's go back a little bit. Whoopsie. Here. Where on the line are you? If you are significantly identify and recognize a lot of your own stuff in that video about selfies, right? Then where do you fall on the chart here? Okay. All right, look, I'm not saying I never take selfies. And I'm not saying I don't like to dance, or I don't like music, or I don't like taking shots or anything like that. That's not the point. All right. Hopefully you get the point. And the point is to reflect on your life so that you have some anagoge, so that it's not that you should eliminate everything below, the middle line, right? No, you should live in the physical world to the fullest, but you should have wisdom and knowledge too, and not be deceived and deluded, right? That's the point. Okay, so here we are. Takeaways from the cave. Here's some ideas that I take away from the cave story. This is only a few. There's a lot more, right? One way to be deceived is by something that resembles reality, right? So in the world of appearances, you've got replicas and simulations and all that kind of thing, right? And if you in your phone world, and your devices all the time, you're in a kind of fake world most of the time. Not that there's not a lot of important information in there about reality, but it's all reflected, right? And the shadows and the images on the lake are not the same thing as the things casting the shadows, right? So I don't know if you've been as unfortunate as me to have a story come back to you about yourself that has some truth in it, but some lie, right? And the lie seems more credible because it's embedded in with a truth that people know that's a public thing, right? So a really crafty liar will blend it together with known truths, right? But similarly, when you get duped into an ideology or a philosophy, that's not good for your health. It's probably because it has elements of reality distorted, right? So unfortunately, easy way to be deceived is by something that resembles reality, right? Because it looks like reality, right? But another takeaway is we can have everything backwards. And there's the guy up in the upper right-hand corner, right? The direction he's prescribed to go in is the other way. Maybe he's going the wrong way. So, and then below that, forward or backward, right? And the person in the lower one is upside down, right? Which sometimes is a good thing to do. Look at things the other way. My karate teacher used to joke around with me and say, look at it this way. And he'd just turn his head to the side, right? But taking different perspectives on things is a good thing. The cave story is to tell you, you might have things backwards, right? And that's why sometimes the one person who seems crazy might actually be the only one who is sane, right? So if you're in that happy mode in the selfie video, and Professor Apeti comes in and starts having a serious conversation with you about reality and illusions and all the matrix and the ways in which you're being manipulated and all that, you and your friends will all laugh at Professor Apeti, right? Because he'll seem like he's insane, but maybe he's the only one who's onto something, right? That's just an example. I'm not going to hunt you down in the nightclub and try to talk to you when you're intoxicated. All right, next takeaway. If you don't realize you're in prison in your own mind, you can never escape, right? And in the matrix, you see like there's a wire connecting. You see a body in a pod in the wire. When they disconnect the wire and they then reconnect it, and it's like that when the prisoner can go, my hand casts a shadow, and when I move my hand, the shadow moves. The shadow isn't real. My hand is real, right? similarly, in the movie, he disconnects, reconnects, and he could see the difference, right? So there's a way out, and somebody's helping him, right? But in this cave, in this matrix, the matrix is my own brain, and it's being programmed by society and all the media and news sources and the culture and Netflix and apps and Facebook and everything else, right? Not just you, but me also, right? So because there's no chains on us and no wire connected to our brain, right? That's what's bad about it. You don't even need to have it. Like, imagine if they put chips in our head, which could control our brains. Then if you never knew about it, you wouldn't know to get the chip out, right? But similarly, you don't need a chip or a wire if you have absorbed the cultural matrix, right? It's like a cultural download, right? It's like a program that society has downloaded into you just by being here and being exposed to everything, right? So if you don't realize that you're being limited by all of your beliefs, right? Not your knowledge, but your beliefs, right? You might never be even try to escape. Certainly can't escape if you don't know that you need to escape, right? Okay, next bullet. The comfort of your prison cell can be dangerously delusional, right? A lot of times people start to realize that they might have been moving in the wrong direction, but they've done it for so long and they're so comfortable in their ways, right? Like the evil that you know is better than the evil that you don't know, right? We're comfortable with the bars on our prison cell after a while, right? I'm speaking metaphorically, but this applies to our life habits and our modes of thinking, right? If you've thought and lived and acted and chosen a certain way for a long time, it's really hard to change, right? So for that reason, the ignorant and even the semi-ignorant, those who don't want to change, resist enlightenment and knowledge, right? Let me drop down 2 bullets. Transcending ignorance can be scary, disorienting, and painful, right? It's just like coming out of your comfort zone. If the models in your head are imprisoning you, but they're your comfort zone, it's hard to step out of your comfort zone, like to step out of the cave and be disoriented and disoriented. Literally, you're not oriented. You don't know up or down, right? You can't see when you come out of the dark, just like if you're in the light and you go into a cave, suddenly you can't see, right? Unless you're a cat, that eyes change quickly, right? So I should have flipped those, but so going up a bullet, are we in an echo chamber with other delusional know-it-alls? Because in Plato's cave, right, the prisoners, they know about the shadows. He comes down and says, the shadows aren't real, something else is real. And they're like, ha, the guy's crazy. And they'll kill him if they have to, right? That's what Plato says, because they killed Socrates, because that's what was going on with Socrates. He was telling them, you got it all backwards, right? You think what you think is knowledge is not, and what you think is not knowledge is, right? And they executed him, right? So I guess there's a reason to be afraid to step into the zone of truth if you've been living in the zone of falsehood your whole life, right? But are we in an echo chamber with other delusional know-it-alls? Well, now's the time to talk about echo chambers, especially in social media. It got worse after Trump. You're all old enough to remember this, right? That before Trump, lots of people would have debates in social media, right? And they might trash each other a little or whatever, and their friends might pile on a little bit. But after Trump got elected, the left and the right, you might have had friends on one side and you're on the other side and vice versa, right? Maybe in your little circle, more people are, were for Trump or for Hillary Clinton, right? Whatever it was, but people on both sides overreacted when they found out that, after the election, they saw people's reactions, because a lot of people don't talk politics that much explicitly. But then after the election, it became clear who voted for who or who was taking what side based on what kind of memes they would post or what kind of stuff they would share. And like they'd argue and like everybody would pile on. And it was like, how could you're on that side? That's it. And they unfriended lots of people unfriended their friends, their media friends anyway, after Trump got elected, right? But that's okay, right? That's okay. But what happens as a result? Now, all the voices that you might have argued and debated with and had disagreements with, but got other perspectives from, right? You pushed them out of your echo chamber. So your echo chamber shrunk, and the only people in your echo chamber are all of those other prisoners, the ones who think exactly like you, and they echo all of your beliefs, right? So you then think that's what everybody who's intelligent thinks, because that's all I ever read. That's all I ever hear. Either you watch Fox News all the time and that's all you believe, or you watch CNN, right? Either you read the Post or you read the Times, right? But no, almost nobody does both to see what both sides are. I'm somebody who looks at both sides, right? So I get it from both sides. That's what happens, right? And that's what makes it a little uncomfortable, right? And nobody wants to be uncomfortable. But I think pushing yourself beyond your comfort zone is the only way to grow, right? And the only way to test your beliefs is to test them against people who disagree with you, not people who agree with you, right? John Stuart Mill, famous philosopher, once said in a book called On Liberty, right? He believed in freedom of speech, freedom of thought, all kinds of freedom, freedom to self-medicate, the government shouldn't be telling you what's moral or what's not moral. As long as you don't hurt anybody else, you should have as much freedom as possible. But what he said about being exposed to alternative views was, he who knows only his own side of the argument knows very little thereof, right? So he would be against safe zones and trigger warnings and all that kind of stuff, right? And I am too. And there are no safe zones in philosophy as far as I'm concerned. Philosophy is total commitment and trust in the process of reasoning to the truth, right? There's no sacred cows, right? That's a metaphor, because in Hinduism, the cow is a sacred animal and you can't eat the cow, right? But in philosophy, there are no metaphorical sacred cows. No matter what the subject is, you should be able to discuss it philosophically to figure out what's the best way to think about it. And the only way to do that, Plato and Socrates and many other philosophers think, is to argue these issues with other like-minded people. Not that like-minded in the sense that they have the same views as you, but like-minded insofar as they want, like John Stuart Mill, to hear both sides of the argument. And they think philosophical reasoning is one of the key ways to become philosophically enlightened. Okay. All right. So that leads to the second to the last thing. How do you know what is real or true or good? Right? Especially if you have it all backwards, not forwards. Right? Well, do you prefer to face a difficult reality, or possibly lose all of your friends if you really study some issue and then change your mind? Oh my God, all my friends, they're not going to like it if they see that I change my mind on this. Peer pressure. At the societal level, it's political correctness. And I think I might have said this in another video of mine. It's so much more important to be correct than it is to be politically correct, because you can be politically correct, but incorrect. What matters is whether or not you're correct, not whether or not you are in line with what everybody else thinks, because if you are, then you don't have a mind of your own and you're afraid to stand on your own 2 feet and think for yourself and figure out what you really believe. All right, Professor Rapetti is preaching at you right now. Okay, I think there's only one more slide. Okay, I think this is the last one. Are you in a cave? And what's your cave like? Right? Here's one way to figure out if you're in a cave. If your mind has stopped working, if you're dogmatically attached to a set of views, ask yourself that question. Not the first one, are you in a cave? But the second one, when was the last time you changed your mind about something important? Can you remember? Did you ever? How long ago was it? Lots of things keep happening in the world constantly. If you're awake and you're paying attention to the visible world, the world of Heraclitus, the world of sense perception and information and all that, right? Then you keep getting information and hearing other arguments and perspectives. And at some point, hopefully, you've changed your mind. Maybe here's some things that most people think are important. Does God exist? Or religion in general, right? Maybe you changed your religion. Or gender. I'm not saying you changed your gender, but maybe you changed your thinking about gender or about gender transgender or about gender preferences or about gender pronouns or any of those issues, what do you think? Did you think about these things one way and then ever change your view? And if so, when and why? Right? Abortion, there's something, right? Students around college age might, have to encounter this question or think about it for personal reasons or because of a friend, right? But it's still a very popular issue in our culture. It's still being debated, right? The ethics of abortion. Have you ever changed your view of that? Or gun control, or climate change, or homosexual marriage, politics in general, right? Trump, Biden, Hillary Clinton. So here's a question. How do you know your mind is working, particularly if you haven't changed it in a long time, right? Here's the primary function of a mind, right? A mind is an examiner of reality, right? It looks at the world, information gets imprinted on the mind, almost like images on a mirror, right? And then you analyze that stuff. And if you have new information that contradicts previous views of yours, your views should change based on the latest and best information and argument and reason available to you. So if you haven't changed your mind is not working. All right, that's really something for you to think about. Can you think outside the box? A lot of people say, yeah, I think outside the box, right? But can you? Do you really? Here's a test for you. Here's a box-like figure, 9 dots in the center of the screen. I'm going to give you a little test. Now, if you know this thing, this 9-dot challenge, you won't be fooled because you've already seen the answer. But if you haven't, don't look it up. See if you can learn something here, okay? This is like the smaller square inside the larger square, right? Here's the task. Draw 4 straight lines touching all 9 dots without taking the pen off the page or your finger off the screen or whatever it is. You get the idea. Okay, so pause the video if you need some time, experiment with it, right? I don't know if you can see my cursor, but I'm going to go like 1 on the left from top to bottom, 2 from left to right on the bottom, 3 going all the way up on the right side, bottom to top, and then 4. Well, if I go all the way, I won't get the one in the middle, but if I bend that, then that's a 5th line. How about this? We go down, we go across, that's 2. We go down, that's 3. Once again, I'm not going to get both in the middle without doing a 5th line. All right. So, can't do it? Take as long as you need. Stuck in rigid thinking? Don't try harder. Try smarter, right? The challenge is to think outside the box. Think in a different way of solving this problem. Okay, I'm going to give you the solution in a moment. And if you don't want it yet, pause, hit the pause button. I'm going to wait for you to find that pause button. And now I'm going to switch. So here it comes. Okay, escape the cave. Think outside the box, right? Because if you've got a matrix-like cave thing in your head, you're stuck in a box, metaphorically speaking, and you've got to figure out a way to shift things and change the way that your box is structured, right? You've got a bunch of assumptions and pictures of the world and beliefs that are limiting you, right? Like if you've never thought about that ikigai thing in the very first lecture or the second lecture, what is my philosophy of life? What's my life plan, right? With the intersecting circles, what I love, what I'm good at, what the world needs, and what I'll get paid for, right? And then the ikigai is the thing in the middle that intersects all 4 of those. That's the way forward for you, right? If you never thought about that, you're stuck in a box, right? Maybe your box was just simply, I got to finish college. That's all I know, right? Because you're not thinking ahead, right? So thinking philosophically is one way of shifting your perspective, taking on multiple perspectives and just cultivating that mind muscle gives you the skill of thinking outside the box, right? By taking on like the views of Heraclitus and Parmenides and Thales and Plato and Socrates and this one and that one, right? The sophists. Philosophy will help you get outside the box. Okay, look at it differently. These are strategies for thinking outside the box and for making sure your mind is working rather than being stuck like a broken clock, right? And not trusting the smaller box inside the larger box, right? Using your reason, right? So look at things differently. Take on new perspectives. Adopt them from the inside. Like, what if you're Jewish, let's just say, well, what if Jesus was the Messiah? What if he was? Right. I worked with a rabbi for about 10 years in a law firm years ago when I was a student throughout my undergraduate, graduate, towards my PhD. I worked in a law firm as a paralegal and a proofreader. And one of my colleagues was a rabbi, and we used to debate a lot. But I remember him telling me that he spent a decade investigating the question of whether or not Jesus could actually be the Messiah. And he thought that Jesus satisfied almost all the criteria except one. And I wish I could remember which one that was. I think it had something to do with the book about Ruth. I don't remember, whatever. That's really a bad memory, so don't go looking there. But the point is, he thought you can't truly be a Jew if you don't have really good reasons for disbelieving the claim that Jesus was the Messiah. So he tried to prove that Jesus was the Messiah, but he couldn't do it. Almost. He got very excited, but he was willing to change his mind. Okay. So whether you're a Jew who thinks you should think about whether or not Jesus was the Messiah, or if you're a Jew or a Christian, and you might want to entertain the possibility that Muhammad was the last prophet, right? Read the Quran. Try to take it on and imagine that it's true. Or if you're in any of those, or you're a Muslim, go back and read the Christian Bible, or vice versa. Or any of those, go read Buddhism or Hinduism or whatever, right? The thing is to try to imagine that it's true. What would it look like? What would the world look like if this other perspective was true, right? And if you could take on another person's perspective, you have just leveled up in your mental toolkit, right? And you've come out of many boxes. The more boxes that you could put on, almost like a pair of philosophical eyeglasses and see the world, sunglasses, see the world through that color, through another color, through it. And then whenever you're presented with a problem, you could see it from multiple perspectives. You're less likely to get stuck in a cave, whether it's your cave or anybody else's. I'm preaching a little bit, philosophical preaching. Okay. So consider the opposite. Whatever your claim is, just consider maybe the opposite. So you think abortion is immoral? Imagine that it might be moral. Who would think it is, and why do they think it is, and what would lead them to? What's the best argument you could make for the opposite position, right? And try to imagine that you're someone who believes that. What is it like? What would it be like if you really believed that the moment of conception, a soul enters the body and God is real, and you're interfering with God's plan? Right? That kind of thing. Okay. Consider the opposite, right? Whatever it is, flip it, twist it, reverse it, Look at it in any which way you can. Question your paradigm. Your paradigm is your mode of looking at the world. It's your philosophical sunglasses that if you have purple glasses, the whole world looks purple. So if you're a materialist, you think all there is matter, or you're a Catholic, you believe in heaven, hell, and purgatory, and the Pope is God's representative, whatever it is, that's your paradigm. It's your model, it's your worldview, it's your lens, right? Question your paradigm, try on a whole bunch of other paradigms, right? Don't be afraid to change, to step out of the cell, step outside the box. Okay, there's one solution. See those 9 dots in there? If you think that looks different, I've got the 9 dots up in the upper left-hand corner without any lines through them. Count the lines. 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, this could be done in a number of different ways. Here's another one, right? In this one, the 2 triangles are closed. In the one above, one of the triangles that you could see, or potential triangle, is open because the lower dots on the left and in the middle are not touching, but that line could have kept going. And then it would be just like the one below, only pointing in a different direction. All right, what's the difference between these and what you were trying to do before? If you compare the difference, you will realize that you were operating under an assumption that is not in the instructions. Let's go back and read the instructions. Take a second. Draw 4 straight lines touching all 9 dots without taking the pen or finger off the page or the screen, right? It doesn't say anything about your lines must not go beyond the imaginary box that's not even really there, but the shape that looks like a box that your mind superimposed on those 9 dots because they kind of look like they form a box. They don't, right? And I kept saying, think outside the box, right? But it didn't sink in, right? So look again here. If you look at the 1 dot in the bottom, right, and go to the right, you went beyond the imaginary box and then went up and then down and then up again, once again, right? But at the top, there's a triangle that represents you going outside the box, right? So you went outside the box twice to be able to do that. Same thing in the bottom one. Now, here's the rub. It can be done. You can do it with only 3 lines. Pause this and try to figure it out. There's the 9 dots up above. All right. So now you can go outside. Now you can go outside the box. Can you figure out how to do it with 3 lines? I'm going to pause and give you a moment. Or, just long enough for you to hit the pause button so I don't show you right away. All right. I'm waiting for you to hit your pause button, during which time you can take as long as you like to figure out the 3-line solution to the 9-dot problem, as it's called. Okay, I'm going to hit the button now so you can see it. Whoa, look at that. Those are 3 straight lines, and you didn't take the pen off the page or your finger off the screen, right? See what you can do when you're capable of thinking outside the box? Now, I'm not advocating this. Well, I'll advocate one thing. Meditation is a good practice for enabling you to think outside the box and to get your mind to work in many different ways. And historical cases seem to suggest that going into altered states of consciousness of any kind, not just through meditation, but through other techniques and technologies and strategies, can also open your mind, right? Altered states of consciousness are ways of stretching your mind, right? Flip it, twist it, reverse it, look at it differently. Look at it this way, as my karate teacher would say. Okay, so let me stop the share so you can see Professor Apeti up close and personal. I apologize if I was lecturing at you a little too much, but I hope that you learned something from this and that it was interesting, not just the music video, which was pretty entertaining, I must admit. I could, do this kind of thing while listening to it. All right, now go take a selfie and post it in the discussion board just for fun after where you put your name to consent form for the class contract. And, I'll give you a point for it if you do it. I'll give you 1 quiz point, extra credit, participate. I'll add it to your participation. That's what I'll do. Remind me if I forget. I'll see it.